Today we're meeting to discuss how the very elements that power our energy infrastructure, our manufacturing, and our defense industrial base are increasingly controlled by our greatest strategic rival, the Chinese Communist Party. Do we continue to buy Chinese minerals and increase our dependence on our greatest adversary? Or do we and our allies begin to mine and produce these critical minerals ourselves? When the Chinese government controls critical minerals, it then has the power to dictate what we say and what we do. This is because if we don't do what they want, they can turn off the flow of critical minerals and cripple our industry. This is not a theoretical problem. The Chinese government has weaponized the rare earth supply chain against the United States. Last month, China imposed export restrictions on rare earths and other materials necessary for American industry. This didn't happen overnight. Over decades, the Chinese government took advantage of our inaction and built up this critical choke point. In 1992, China's then leader, Deng Xiaoping, stated, "There is oil in the Middle East, there is rare earth in China." Since that statement, China's dominance in rare earths has grown to the point where China will control 76% of rare earth element refining by 2030. That's according to an estimate by the International Energy Agencies. We're watching Xi Jinping wield the rare earth weapon Deng Xiaoping began developing decades ago. Over the span of 30-plus years, China grabbed different parts of the critical minerals industry, developed a loaded gun, and pointed it directly at American industry. It strategically acquired an American magnet company, stripped out the American know-how, and then shipped everything to China. It also bought up mining assets overseas, tanked global mineral prices, and killed American mining firms. These strategic moves by China threaten our nation, our people, and our way of life. Take the rare earth element samarium. It is crucial for military platforms, but almost the entire supply comes from China. Without it, we would be unable to make certain defense platforms, and that's only one element. There are many more that are critical to American manufacturing, national security, and our economy. Without them, our society would crumble. Bringing mining value chains back to the United States will take time and require concerted effort from Congress and industry. Without a permanent signal from Congress, businesses will not invest and China's advantage will grow. This year, the Trump administration has taken bold actions to start breaking our dependence on China. President Trump issued executive orders to unleash American energy and created the National Energy Dominance Council. He also strategically invested in U.S. companies, sending a strong signal to the market that the U.S. government will take on the CCP to prevent its long-term dominance of the critical mineral sector. In South Korea, in his meeting with Xi, President Trump brought the United States and our allies a crucial one-year opportunity on rare earths and other critical minerals, the export of which the Chinese government unilaterally restricted in October. The task now before Congress, the executive branch, private industry, and our many allies and partners around the world is to use this year and move quickly to disarm China's rare earths loaded gun before it can be fired again at the global economy. We need an all-hands-on-deck effort to maximize rare earths mining, processing, and manufacturing capabilities across the free world and end our mineral dependencies on China before it's too late. Last week, the committee released an investigative report on China's price manipulation. Prices are a crucial part of this industry because it tells customers how much to buy and investors when to invest. When China controls the prices, investors cannot make smart decisions, and we will never have an American-centric mining industry.
As you can see, just when Charlie is about to kick the ball, Lucy pulls it out from under him, as she always does. And that's exactly what's happening with the US and China. The CCP is running the same old economic playbook in different industries, and we're falling for it again and again. Here's the playbook. First, the CCP makes much more stuff than their domestic market requires. Second, they export the excess stuff below their cost. By doing this, they pull the rug out from under non-Chinese companies trying to compete. And then third, once the CCP has killed the competition, they weaponize their monopoly for coercive purposes. Last week, this committee released a 52-page bipartisan investigation into how the CCP uses this playbook to dominate critical minerals, and by extension, our supply chains. America once led the world in rare earth production, but those days are gone. China, as you can see, has surged production, flooding world markets. But the CCP didn't just produce more. They sold critical minerals at unfair prices, even below the cost of production. In doing so, they killed their competition and created a monopoly. If private companies colluded to kill off their competitors, their executives would be in these handcuffs. But because this massive price-fixing conspiracy was orchestrated by the Chinese Communist Party, it's us, not them, that find ourselves in handcuffs. This is a rock. Inside these types of rocks are rare earths, which eventually get processed and made into these magnets. What you might not know is that there's a magnet in every motor. And motors aren't just in cars, but in so many devices that we depend on, including this blender. Mr. Chairman, care for a smoothie? You could thank me and the magnets that help power this blender later. America used to be the world's leading producer of magnets until 1998, but then we got played. Just take the story of Magnequench, a GM subsidiary which had a large magnet factory in Indiana. Chinese investors bought it and agreed to keep the Indiana factory open for 5 years. But 5 years and 1 day later, I'm not making that up, 5 years and 1 day later, guess what happened? They shut down the magnet factory in Indiana and moved all production to China. Here's a picture of this Magnequench factory in China. Now that China dominates rare earths and magnets, they have the power to not just unplug this blender, but our entire economy. But the keys to unlock our handcuffs are right here in this room. Niron produces the world's only permanent magnet that uses 0 rare earths. MP Materials operates the only rare earth mine in America, Mountain Pass, California, which is pictured behind me. And Lithium Americas is developing the largest lithium deposit in the US. If these companies fail, the CCP wins. But if these companies succeed, we all win. And that includes the Chinese people themselves. Some of us may recall the 2005 movie Blood Diamond about African diamonds mined using forced labor. Well, it turns out the CCP is mining many of its critical minerals using Uyghur forced labor. So here's my proposal for a fictional sequel. It's called Blood Minerals, a movie about how China is exploiting its own people to mine critical minerals and then weaponize its monopoly against Americans. This is unacceptable. I think it's time for a Manhattan Project-like effort to end our rare earth dependency on China. But if we just increase production and not the tools and the talent, we won't solve the problem. We need to mine, refine, and train the workers who can do it. So let this investigation be our call to action. Right now, back home in Chicago, Mr. Chairman, my beloved Chicago Bears are 7-3 because they stopped just playing defense and they started playing offense. Chairman, let's be like the Bears and show the CCP how it's done.
I appreciate your focus on highlighting the Chinese Communist Party's domination of market manipulation when it comes to critical minerals. Lithium Americas is proud to be part of the conversation and the solution. My name is Jonathan Evans. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Lithium Americas. We're developing the critical Thacker Pass project, a fully integrated mining and processing operation located in Humboldt County in northern Nevada, which hosts the largest known measured lithium resource and reserve in the world. Thacker Pass is owned by a joint venture between Lithium Americas and General Motors. Our immediate focus is advancing phase 1 of the project towards production, targeting nominal design capacity of 40,000 tons per year of battery-grade lithium carbonate. Once online, phase 1 will increase U.S. lithium production tenfold and could meet roughly 20% of the U.S. processed lithium demand. We're grateful for the U.S. Department of Energy's $2.23 billion loan, which will help finance the construction and processing facilities at Thacker Pass. Together with our partners in administration, we are strengthening America's supply chain, creating high-quality jobs, and bolstering our long-term energy security and prosperity. Onshoring large-scale U.S. lithium production is not optional. Lithium is a critical element of national security, powering a vast array of defense technologies to sustain both resilient military operations and essential civilian infrastructure. Beyond its strategic importance, lithium represents a powerful driver of economic growth and energy independence, creating American jobs, strengthening domestic industries, and bolstering long-term energy resilience. Yet the United States remains dangerously dependent on foreign countries, including China, for this critical mineral. The U.S. currently produces less than 1% of the U.S. global supply of lithium. This is not merely an economic vulnerability, it poses a direct threat to national security. China, recognizing lithium's strategic value, has aggressively moved to dominate the global supply chain. From mining and refining to battery manufacturing, Chinese companies now control roughly 70% of the global lithium chemical processing capacity, using state-backed subsidies, and predatory pricing to suppress competition and cement their market dominance. I'll add they control over 80% of the battery production in the world. While the U.S. played a critical role in developing lithium-ion battery in the 1980s, China has since built the infrastructure and industrial base needed to dominate the global market and shows no intention of relinquishing that control. The CCP views dominance over critical minerals as a matter of geopolitical strategy. Through a coordinated, decades-long effort, China has systematically secured control over key mineral supply chains to shape their global markets in their favor. China now leads the global lithium industry, not only in mining and processing raw materials, but also in manufacturing critical components such as battery cathodes, electrolytes, and the batteries themselves. The CCP actively supports its domestic companies in acquiring foreign assets, offering them low to no interest loans and political backing to secure supply chains abroad. This pattern is evident across regions including Africa, Australia, and Latin America. To maintain its dominance, China has depressed global lithium prices to discourage investment by non-Chinese firms and to deter public or private capital from entering the market. Despite soaring demand and double-digit annual growth in lithium applications, this price manipulation has constrained the development of independent, transparent supply chains. Efforts by Western entities to establish transparent market-based price indexes have been undermined or displaced by Chinese-controlled platforms such as the Shanghai Metals Market and the London Metals Exchange, both of which are now controlled by Chinese pricing data. As a result, global financial institutions rely on distorted benchmarks, limiting Western firms' ability to secure financing and expand non-Chinese lithium supply chains. We cannot let the CCP continue to dominate critical minerals. We are thankful that President Trump, his administration, and Congress are focused on this and that the U.S. government is partnering with companies like Lithium America to ensure a strategic global supply chain. Thacker Pass is the only fully permitted under construction lithium production project on U.S. soil. This project will put the U.S. on a path to self-sufficiency, but it's just a start. But developing projects like Thacker Pass is highly risky. The upfront costs for exploration, permitting, appeals, and community engagement are high, and the timelines are long and uncertain, which deter private investment. Targeting federal support, including streamlined and predictable permitting, timely resolution of appeals, and tools to de-risk early strategies can help ensure these projects are successful. The U.S. cannot compete globally unless important national projects can be built in a timely manner. The formal permitting and subsequent appeals process for Thacker Pass took nearly 5 years. We were actually considered fast-tracked, given the process typically takes 7 to 10 years in the U.S., which is among the longest in the world. Such lengthy, unpredictable, and litigation-prone processes discourage private capital from investing domestically. The federal government must also continue to explore financial support via low-cost loans and other structural financial instruments to help fund projects and attract private capital to co-invest. We also need to establish programs and tools that deliver true price transparency. Public capital markets are dissuaded from financing and supporting China-backed supply chains, given the global narrative has been hijacked by China and its pricing models. The same pattern appears in other critical minerals, including rare earths. Despite weak headline prices, China continues to acquire overseas lithium and other key resources, often at discounted valuations, reinforcing its market power. The U.S. can level the playing field by supporting a temporary minimum price tied to validated market price-based production costs. Today, China is running high-cost domestic capacity below cost, backstopped by subsidies. to flood this market and depress prices. In November, the CEO of CATL, which is the largest battery manufacturer in the world, admitted to this, telling Reuters that they were now stopping production at their mine as they achieved their goal of lowering lithium prices.
Since its inception, the Select Committee has made the security of America's rare earth supply chain a top priority. We deeply appreciate your leadership and the chance to engage consistently on this critical issue. I appear today on behalf of MP Materials, the largest and most commercially advanced rare earth producer in the United States. We own and operate Mountain Pass, America's only scaled rare earth mine and processing facility, which we rescued from bankruptcy in 2017. To restore the full supply chain, inclusive of mining, refining, magnet manufacturing, and recycling, we built Independence, the first fully integrated magnet facility built in the United States in a generation in Fort Worth, Texas. When MP was founded in 2017, America's supply chain was at a complete standstill. Today, after investing more than $1 billion of private capital into our U.S. operations, Mountain Pass is the world's second most productive rare earth mine and an indispensable cornerstone for a secure end-to-end supply chain in the United States. We've restored refining capabilities, produced the first rare earth metal in decades, and are commissioning full-scale magnet production. Our workforce has grown from 8, literally a team of 8, to nearly 1,000 people across California, Texas, and Nevada. In the coming years, MP Materials will invest another $1 billion to execute our public-private partnership with the Pentagon and deliver for our foundational customers, including General Motors and Apple, creating over 1,000 incremental new manufacturing jobs and scaling U.S. capabilities across every link of that supply chain. Your investigation makes incredibly clear what we have experienced directly at MP Materials. While China's industry is highly skilled and highly capable, its dominant position is both enabled and hardened by subsidies, price manipulation, and scale. In the early years of our business, we produced mineral concentrate at Mountain Pass that could only be sold into China, the sole market with the refining capacity to process it. We reinvested those profits to build U.S. refining capabilities at Mountain Pass. But as we prepared to launch, neodymium praseodymium prices, the price of the key commodity, collapsed to levels below even China's lowest production costs. That predatory pricing destroyed incentives to invest, and it kept capital scarce. China's sweeping export controls this year were a significant wake-up call. They disrupted supply chains, triggered factory shutdowns in the United States, and they underscored an important truth. Rare earths may be a small upstream industry worth just tens of billions of dollars, but they underpin trillions in downstream economic activity and millions of jobs. Physical AI, robotics, advanced semiconductors, electric vehicles, blenders, everything. These are the industries that are the backbone of the U.S. economy. This vulnerability created the conditions for urgent coordinated action. In July of this year, MP Materials and the Pentagon entered into a transformative public-private partnership. The agreements are anchored by 3 pillars closely aligned with this committee's recommendations, and they reflect the urgency that the chair and the ranking member have called for. We are grateful for the bipartisan support expressed by the chairman and ranking member following this announcement. It's a clear signal of the importance of securing and acting to restore America's rare earth supply chain. First, the partnership is anchored by a price floor agreement that directly addresses the market-distorting practices identified by this investigation. Second, it includes a 10-year magnet offtake commitment, enabling us to invest well over another $1 billion in the coming years to take our U.S. production capacity towards a tenfold increase to 10,000 metric tons of magnets per year. Finally, it includes a transformational capital investment that positions the Pentagon as MP's largest shareholder. Now, this feature ensures that taxpayers share in the upside opportunity created by the partnership's features, including mechanisms like the price floor. Based on our current market capitalization, this stake has already generated approximately $700 million in unrealized gains for taxpayers. These measures demonstrate how public-private partnerships can deliver national security benefits while creating opportunities for taxpayers and the federal government to share in the upside rather than simply absorbing risk and losses. The bipartisan recommendations contained in this committee's report offer a strong blueprint, and we endorse its direction. Where appropriate, the federal government should deploy tools that neutralize predatory pricing. Congress should level the playing field in trade. Congress should support workforce development initiatives. Congress should endeavor to reasonably compress permitting timelines for high-standard projects. The United States should pursue sectoral arrangements with trusted allies and partners. And finally, the United States should incentivize and reward American companies that source U.S.-produced critical minerals and derivative products. It is worth noting the irony that China is not only the largest producer of rare earths, but also the largest end market for both materials and magnets. They're the largest customer. Strong, deliberate action by U.S. companies, akin to the agreements we signed with General Motors in 2022 and Apple earlier this year, can help reverse decades of dependency. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, members of the committee, America can achieve resiliency again. We share your view that doing so is no longer optional. Supply chains are the front lines of industrial and national security. Beijing's escalation this year was a wake-up call. In the near term, its actions were disruptive and costly, but they may ultimately prove to be a strategic miscalculation. If we respond with sustained resolve, these actions can become a catalyst for rebuilding a secure, competitive supply chain that takes this issue off the table once and for all.
My name is Jonathan Roundtree, and I serve as CEO of Naira Magnetics, a Minnesota-based company that manufactures the world's first commercially scalable, high-powered permanent magnets, free of any rare earth elements. I'm proud to report that we're already producing magnets for customers across multiple sectors at the ton scale. I'm grateful for the strong bipartisan support in Congress and the administration for the strategic value of U.S. manufactured magnets that eliminate foreign dependencies while strengthening domestic industrial capacity. Your attention to America's magnet supply chain is very much appreciated by virtually every industrialized sector, but particularly our automotive, consumer, and defense customers and prospects. Today, U.S. industries consume roughly 50,000 tons of permanent magnets annually, but analysts believe this figure will at least double by 2040. However, current U.S. manufacturing output is no more than 10,000 tons. This import dependency touches virtually every congressional district, as robots, smartphones, medical devices, and advanced weapons systems cannot function without these materials. The Chinese government has strategically pursued its market position to gain leverage over critical supply chains that drive enormous global economic activity. Over the last 30 years, Chinese companies have exported low-priced rare earth magnets to global markets benefiting from state subsidies and non-market economic structures. China now controls 90% of global rare earth processing and magnet manufacturing, rising to over 98% for the most strategic heavy rare earths. And until only very recently, U.S. magnet production capacity had collapsed. But decades of anti-competitive pricing have also created domestic economic incentives to invest in breakthrough technologies that could disrupt legacy systems and thereby weakening monopolistic control of the rare earth supply chain. The 2010 maritime trade dispute between China and Japan led American engineers to invent in 2011 a highly stable permanent magnet without any rare earth inputs. Unlike legacy neodymium-based magnets, these iron nitride magnets are manufactured with secure, domestically abundant resources, iron and nitrogen, the most common element in our atmosphere. Iron nitride is a new magnet for a new century that no foreign power can monopolize or restrict. We recognize that we are only one among many alternative solutions, including post-consumer recycling and tailings. As a matter of national security, every option should be explored and supported as the U.S. builds a more resilient domestic supply chain. However, iron nitride technology transforms the magnet supply chain by enabling the manufacture of permanent magnets from iron and nitrogen, reducing the need for rare earth mining, chemical separation facilities, and complex metallurgical processing. A single, vertically integrated facility transforms commodity iron ore and atmospheric nitrogen into finished magnets. This entire pipeline exists today within America's borders. Third-party and customer testing confirms commercial viability in approximately 2/3 of permanent magnet applications, and institutional investors, including GM, Stellantis, and Samsung, have invested over $300 million in scaling the technology. Iron nitride is not a science experiment. NIRAM broke ground last month on a facility that will begin producing up to 1,500 tons of permanent magnets in 2027. And we're actively evaluating sites for a second 10,000-ton per year facility. This domestic production capacity serves American automotive manufacturers, technology companies, defense contractors, and energy firms with reliable supply while creating hundreds of highly skilled manufacturing jobs. The United States already has everything needed to build a secure, resilient, and diversified magnet supply chain. To accelerate this transition, I respectfully urge Congress and the administration to consider 5 concrete actions. 1, to establish federal procurement preferences for domestically manufactured magnets. 2, extend Title III of the Defense Production Act and similar authorities to alternative magnet technologies alongside rare earth processing initiatives. 3, create tax incentives that level the playing field for domestic producers without picking winners among competing technologies. 4, direct federal agencies to prioritize supply chain security over short-term cost savings. And 5, provide import tariff exemptions for manufacturing equipment from allied trading partners. American industry and innovation have produced proven solutions. Federal policy must now align with strategic necessity.
What are the current barriers that you're facing, financial and otherwise, and how can we work with you to speed up the process, given this timeline that we are working with?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the largest barriers that we have to level the market is price transparency. I think you've heard the same in rare earths. Lithium is no different. They followed the same curves. In our industry, pricing is just starting to go up after coming off a high about 2 or 3 years ago. Now it's about where it was about 5 years ago. I know rare earths fairly well as well. If you look at ones like dysprosium, you would think it'd be at all-time high pricing given the situation the global economy is facing outside of China, and it's in the same situation. Price discovery and fair pricing attracts private investment. The partnership between the U.S. government and private companies can actually be enhanced that way. The ball has started to roll already with some of the programs and some of the assistance programs that both Lithium Americas and MP Materials now are enjoy. The other issue is around permitting. Just as it takes a difficulty getting actually financing done, permitting timelines in the U.S. are very, very long. If you're a private investor, you're going to look at market conditions and market growth potential, but you're also going to look at when am I going to get my money back? If permitting takes 10 years or 20 years, and there are projects in this country, I will point out in copper, in Resolution, I think that's been around 15 years in development. It's a very large copper deposit. Uncertainty around permitting timelines makes people go away. I've had pension funds and others ask us in our financing process, are you fully permanent? When we weren't, they said, come back and tell me when you are. So those 2 legs are very, very important. The third thing I believe is actually programs like we're being discussed today and are actually already in place. Public-private partnership is important. The government needs to give a signal, and it's the government's job to actually determine really what's important for this country down the road. This is no different than the space race. If you look at the problems that the Johnson administration had convincing the American public to keep funding the space race over the 60s, it was difficult. What we got out of that was we were leaders in the semiconductor industry. Things like Velcro and all other kinds of technology actually came out during that process. Semiconductors were $1,000 each in 1960. By 1970, they were $1. And it spurned huge economic growth and leadership globally that the U.S. enjoyed. We're in the same situation here. All of the technologies we talked about are in everything in this room. Your blender, your phone, your computer, our defense systems. We need to respond, but we need to be on a level playing field. The industry and the capital markets need to understand what true pricing and true cost is. That'll attract financing, and the government definitely needs to give a signal, and we need to be able to build things in this country again. The laws are such that we have to have, and we do have the highest standards in the world, but they need to be somewhat predictable and reasonable for financial investors to support projects like this and actually get a return. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6 months ago, the thing that we were most worried about at MP Materials was the predatory pricing identified by your investigation, and it was an issue entirely outside of our control. That changed entirely with the inking of our transformative public-private partnership in July. This issue has effectively been taken off the table, and it's now incumbent on us to execute and act, and we take that responsibility incredibly seriously. The truth is there's no silver bullet here. These issues are complex. All of the committee's recommendations in its bipartisan report are important to execute on. There isn't one individual thing that will solve this in and of itself. But I would highlight that products do need markets. And I think what the Congress can do is both incentivize and aim to reward companies, large downstream end users, that give procurement preferences for US-made critical minerals and derivative products. There is enormous aggregated buying power in the downstream of the American economy that can compel a lot of activity, and that can happen in the private sector. And again, I would applaud the efforts of General Motors in 2022. We would not have a rare earth factory coming online in Fort Worth, Texas, were it not for them acting in 2022, well before this issue was in the mainstream. And I would also recognize Apple for doing so with us earlier this year following a 5-year relationship. The second thing I would advise is that between our closest allies and trusted partners, countries like South Korea and Japan, Australia, we can work together to have the right resources, the right processing capabilities, and the right markets to create real resiliency. Right now, we need to bring supply online, but as that supply comes online, we have a lot more optionality, and I think our efforts abroad can be a lot more effective.
I want to show a picture from 1973 when OPEC, a group of oil-rich countries in the Middle East, imposed a total oil embargo on America. Millions of Americans were left with empty tanks, and our economy nearly ground to a halt. This lesson was not lost on the CCP. As the chairman mentioned, 20 years later, Deng Xiaoping, the former leader of China, said, quote, "There is oil in the Middle East, there is rare earth in China." Mr. Roundtree, the CCP saw America's dependence on Middle Eastern oil as a model. And the CCP copied this model to control rare earths and induce American dependence, right?
Yes, it's similar, but it's a little bit different because they didn't embargo a country here. They have a licensing system where individual customers have to apply an onerous process sharing a lot of sensitive information to basically obtain a license that only lasts for 6 months to obtain those magnets. And so sharing a lot of sensitive, American IP.
Let's take a look at one important rare earth compound where the CCP used their playbook. Let's look at a material called NdPr oxide, which is essential in permanent super hard magnets. It costs Chinese producers roughly $50 per kilogram to make NdPr. $50, that's the key number to keep in mind. When the US tried to make our own NdPr, let's see what China did. They slashed the price from roughly $170 per kilogram, as you can see here, to about $49 per kilogram in 2024. And that's, now $49, Mr. Slouster, that's less than the $50 cost of production, right?
Correct.
That's not a coincidence. This steep decline happened immediately after the CCP met to discuss the price of NdPr and then ordered Chinese producers to flood the market to drop the price. But that's not the only mineral the CCP has targeted. Let's take a look at samarium, which powers heat-resistant magnets and guidance technology in our critical weapon systems, such as the F-35, the Tomahawk cruise missile, and the Stinger missile. The CCP controls nearly all of the world's supply of samarium. And just like with NdPr, they've used that control to drop prices so America cannot compete. Just look here. As the US made attempts to create domestic sources through contracts with MP Materials and other companies, we see how the CCP brought the price down from around $20 per kilogram in 2022 to $9.91 per kilogram in August of this year. But the key thing here is that the average cost to produce samarium, even in China, is $11 per kilogram. Again, the CCP is selling for less than their cost. The same is true for magnets. Mr. Slauster, as you can see behind me, in 2020, we found this very interesting memo from the Chinese Commerce Ministry's archives. Can you please put this up? This is a fascinating memo. It says, for magnet exports, for Chinese rare earth companies, quote, the transaction price tends to be low, even to the point of being lower than the production costs. The CCP is straight up admitting that it's selling for less than the cost of production, right, Mr. Slauster?
Yes, our view is that magnets are being sold for less than the production cost and the cost of raw material.
That's predatory pricing, as you mentioned. The CCP playbook is clear. Overproduce, underprice below the cost of production, thus attempting to kill its competitors, and then weaponize the monopoly. So the question is, what do we do about it? Mining and processing more rare earths in America is only one part of the solution, I respectfully submit. We also need alternatives that potentially bypass rare earths entirely. Mr. Roundtree, your company produces the world's only high-performance rare earth-free magnets. I actually have one right here, which is stronger than traditional rare earth magnets. If produced at scale, it appears that your magnets could be cheaper than normal magnets. So if the CCP cut off rare earth exports entirely to the US, potentially at scale, your magnets could keep our economy going. They work by using an entirely new technology which you described, which is called iron nitride, combining iron and nitrogen. Mr. Roundtree, this approach was developed by a University of Minnesota professor named Jingpeng Wang, pictured behind me, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Dr. Wang isn't just your founder, but he's also an immigrant from, you guessed it, China. He does his work at a federally funded lab in the US. If we want to break China's stranglehold on magnets, we need an all-hands-on-deck approach. That means welcoming the best talent from around the world, including China. It also means funding research and uncuffing ourselves from our dependence on the CCP.
I want to ask our witnesses today, the issue is, how do we catch up? You know, we are way behind the Chinese, especially with critical supply chains as it relates to not only rare earth, but critical minerals. How long do you think it'll take the United States to build back supply chains to make sure they're fully capable of supplying all the demands in the U.S. marketplace? And what role could efforts like price supports play in buttressing that market to make sure, as Ranking Member Christian Amorthe pointed out, that the costs don't drop below the cost of production? We kind of create a price floor there. We aggregate demand. We make sure that we are producing to the U.S. demand and making sure that we produce with a guarantee that the floor never drops below the cost of production, which kind of acts as an insurance policy. So I want to get your perspective on how you think that would play in helping the marketplace and making sure, too, the demand signal is sent and investments take place as they should in those areas. Mr. Roundtree, we'll begin with you, and then we'll go to Mr. Slauster and Mr. Evans.
Yeah, I think for Niron, for us, we need the capital to help get to scale. At scale, we don't necessarily need the price support. What would help us is offtake agreements, right? And you know, we are scaling up our technology as quickly as possible to get to that 10,000 ton where we can really move the needle on magnet supply. But we're going to need all of the above solutions to really accelerate out of this challenge. At Niron, we have 1,500 tons of capacity coming online starting in 2027, and we're working with the administration to see how quickly we can bring on a 10,000 ton factory, targeting to try and have that coming online by sometime around 2029.
That's great. Matt?
Before I look forward, I want to look back because I think it's relevant here. In 2017, the founder of our company, James Lutinsky, he acquired Mountain Pass when it had 8 people and was in care and maintenance under the supervision of a federal judge. There was no accounting system, no corporate infrastructure, literally 8 people. The U.S. had 0 mining, 0 refining, and 0 magnet manufacturing. Today, we have the second largest rare earth mine on Earth right now in the state of California. We have the largest rare earth refinery in the Western Hemisphere, again at Mountain Pass. We have metal production online and on a commercial basis, and we're getting ready to do full-scale magnet production. And we've come that far in 8 years with very little air support for the core central issue identified by this committee, which is predatory pricing. Right. So now that we have significant resolve and that issue, in our case, has been effectively taken off the table, we can move much more quickly. The key missing link in the supply chain today is both increasing domestic magnet manufacturing capacity, which we're on pace to get to 10,000 tons by 2028, and certain heavy rare earths, which are essential in small quantities to the production of those magnets, which we're working on via our public-private partnership. So I do think, now that this issue is well understood and there's a lot of resolve, we are a lot further today than we were 3 years ago, and I think 3 years from now we'll be even further.
That's great, thanks. Jonathan?
I think price discovery is very important. At the end of the day, what's happening here should be an obvious solution for public capital or private capital actually finance this. But what we've seen here, and lithium is no different than rare earths, is that economics and the science of economics is being bent to China's will. That has dissuaded private capital coming off the sidelines. I think putting in, as we mentioned, as the report actually recommends, price discovery to help redefine and take over the narrative is going to help. On top of that, there are tools that we have in place already with tariffs and other anti-dumping things that can be triggered if the Chinese misbehave. Finally, as mentioned here before, I think globally that'll help spur more development, including even investing in the United States. Allied governments like Korea and Japan have very little critical minerals or rare earths, so they have invested abroad for years with firms like JOGMEC, which is part of the Japanese government, which helps fund, and they typically take small investments, but the biggest issue we have in the United States is the upfront cost. So building a facility like MP Materials has or is already built, like we're actively in construction and you're all welcome to join. We have 900 workers on site right now. It's much more expensive than building it in China for obvious reasons. We follow rules here and laws. We're investing money actually in the community. It's a holistic, it's a long-term generational asset. But overcoming that, no different than semiconductors, you need clear market signals for private capital to either come off the sidelines and finance it on its own or in concert with the government. Once the facilities are in place, these are world-class facilities. We can compete on a global basis when the level playing field, but upfront actually getting the capital costs actually financed has always been a challenge.
Very good.
Mentioned a handful of years ago, some of our automotive leaders have directed a cause or a purpose for this nation to really do some great work in critical minerals. But it wasn't just a handful of years ago that policymakers recognize that we have a problem with our dependency on China for critical minerals, critical materials that go into our supply chain. And in fact, when I was working in the administration of Barack Obama on a little thing called the U.S. Auto Rescue, the initiative that saved our large automotive companies from bankruptcy and rescued hundreds of thousands of jobs, we recognized that we were dependent on China for minerals, and we were dependent on China for microchips. In a bipartisan way, this Congress acted in the year 2022 on microchips. Now we have cause of purpose to act on minerals. I have drafted legislation that I encourage all of you to take a look at. It is called Unearth America's Future Act. This is a 100-page comprehensive bill to direct loan guarantees, tax credits, create an R&D center of excellence to address what all three of you have been talking about, the access to capital considerations. Now, Mr. Rowntree, you're the only synthetic mineral or material producer on the panel. Why is it important that synthetic critical materials be included in congressional policy, and what are the most important ways they need to be reflected in that policy?
Yeah, alternative technologies are absolutely critical across a different range of applications. You know, it really then focuses on plays to the strengths of what the U.S. does best, which is to innovate. And so that's what we need to do, is to innovate across these critical materials to find different solutions that will enable us to reduce and basically eliminate our dependence on, you know, foreign supply, so we can become basically a champion of that in our own economy.
Yeah, and so while Nylon Magnetics is already scaling production, many synthetic materials are still in the demonstration phase, and as Congress seeks to act now, how do we make sure that the next generation of innovations like these are included in our policy discussions or our way forward?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, it's taken us 12 years to get to this point.
Right.
You know, materials development is tough. It takes a long time. And so support is needed during R&D, but it's basically beyond that through pilot. And so we were a successful recipient of several Department of Energy grants, including a $20 million scale-up grant that enabled us to get from the gram to the ton scale where we're currently producing today. What's needed now is support beyond that to help us scale. And so we need to make sure that we, you know, cross the valley of death here and scale the technology and get to a point here where, you know, we can be competitive here with China-based prices on these critical minerals.
Yeah, and that's one thing where we remain hopeful in my drafted legislation, Unearth America's Future Act, that we can address some of those valley of death considerations. And then, Mr. Schlauster, you know, in terms of existing trade deals, as they still somewhat exist, we have USMCA, which is under its review process. I'm in Michigan, a manufacturing evangelist, and I recognize that there's potential opportunity for us to double down with our allies. You mentioned Texas, but what are other ways in which we could work with trusted trade partners on critical minerals and development?
Well, I think when you look at our trusted allies, you have all the pieces you need. You have production capacity, you have processing capacity, you have large end markets, and those are the fundamental pieces you need to create resiliency in a supply chain and viability for producers.
And is there an opportunity to box out China?
We need supply online. That's the most urgent thing. But as we bring supply online, I think there's an opportunity to work with partners to create resiliency and create the outcomes we want in terms of recognition of market economy costs, recognition of standards that are acceptable. And I think those are things we should be pursuing.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just conclude by saying that the purpose and point of this hearing is to direct American strategy, to give us leadership. Of course, I've pitched my own bill many times, and will continue to talk about it until I'm blue in the face. But I continue also to join for bipartisan solutions for a way forward for American manufacturing and our supply chain to beat China.